Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and lest we forget, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I'm coming at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I'm coming at you from the Robservatory. And this is Robservations episode number 455. Can you believe that? 455? I tell you, man, I got a bumper crop, if you watch Never Let Me Go, a bumper crop of letters today, including a letter that I laughed out loud when I was reading it. I always read Willow Yang's letters. Normally I don't, to be honest. When Mike Bodden forwards me the letters, I like to let them hit me as I'm reading them to you. So if somebody says something funny, I want to be able to react in a genuine fashion. But when Willow Yang sends me letters, I have to read her letters. And this one is particularly amusing. So I am looking forward to reading it aloud to all of you. You know, there's not a whole lot of information or entertainment news coming out these days. So it's interesting. I'm looking for more interesting op-ed articles to start the show with, and I found a pretty interesting one, and basically about how Hollywood works. Like, I don't mean like how Hollywood, the whole business of Hollywood, but I mean the actual day-to-day workings of Hollywood. And what I mean by that is on an actual set. A Hollywood day is usually about 12 hours long. It's more than that, actually, but it's officially 12 hours. Let's say you show up on set, say your what's called a call time. If your call time is 7 a.m., the end of your day will be at 7:30 p.m. because you've got a half an hour built in there for lunch. But it's a 12-hour day. And the reason it's because that's about as far as you can push people to do work. Because, as we all know, making movies is an expensive proposition. And when you're actually in physical production, you're burning a lot of cash. You can actually, I've said this many times on the show, but I'll say it again. You can actually calculate how much every second costs on a set. So what I mean is, say your budget for each day, let's say it's $100,000. Hollywood movie, you're spending $100,000 per day during principal photography. And that would be including all of everybody that you're paying, all the equipment, the equipment you've rented, power, everything that you would need, catering, everything that goes into making a day on a film set. And so if you have $100,000, you can actually, I don't know what that is, but you can calculate that back 12 hours and figure out how much every second costs. And the thing is, when you're making a movie and you have a schedule, you have to keep on that schedule. Like, you can't shoot as much as you want, because if you don't finish, you don't have another $100,000 for another day, especially on a lower budget production. When you have budgeted to shoot, say, 18 days, which can be pretty standard on a lower budget film, you're going to shoot in 18 days. If you get more than that, you're lucky. But if you shoot 18 days and you're shooting, say, 6-day weeks because of the rentals, sometimes you want to shoot over the weekends because a weekend counts as one day, so you can save money for your equipment rentals that way. And normally the guild, there's rules, and the rules say if you shoot for 12 hours, you have 12 hours on, 12 hours off. But there's still drive time to the set. There's all kinds of things. So even though you're shooting for 12 hours, let's call it a 16-hour day total. That's a long day. And there's been a lot of criticism on lower budget movies. The crews get pushed. I mean, if I'm directing or I'm producing, my goal is to make my day. And if you don't make your day, you don't know if you can make it up. And the way you make your days is if everybody that's working for you is working most effectively. If you have elaborate light setups, and if you as a director want, things that are very specific, that takes longer, and you have to take that into consideration. So if it's going to take you, like, normally, the way I like to think of it is in 15-minute increments. So every 15 minutes, you want to be getting a shot off. That's in a perfect world. So hopefully you've designed, the more you work, the more you plan. As a director, you plan, I've said this before, but I like to, what I do call walking my set, walking my day. So in the beginning of a day, you take your first AD, because your first AD is the person who's going to make sure that the crew is running on time, basically. And you take your director of photography and a few keys, a few department heads if you want. And you as the director walk that whole day. And you go, if you're shooting on multiple sets, whatever it is you're shooting that day, you're giving everybody a vague notion. The more specific you can be, the better. But you're giving them a notion of, here's what I want for the day. And so the first AD can then tell all the department heads, whoever, if there's department heads that go with you, like you don't have to take in hair and makeup people necessarily, but you want to take your grip and electric department, camera department, so they all know, because they have to anticipate every 15 minutes. You want your camera department to know where the camera's going to be 5 or 6 setups from now, so they can plan accordingly. So the more you as a director can tell your crew what you want them to do, the better off you're going to be. But it's still, either way, production is brutal. It's exhausting. And it's always been criticized that people get pushed pretty far in production. Now, I would argue that when you get into production, you know what you're getting into. I mean, the first job that I ever had, as I've told people, was I was the production assistant, the art department production assistant on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And it was one of the most grueling jobs I ever had, but it was also one of the most fun jobs I'd ever had. But we were constantly building things, and we were working way before the film actually started shooting, because we had to build the sets and create everything, and it was brutal. It was brutal, but I loved every minute of it. But if you're a longtime veteran of production, you might not be. Anyway, I found an article that I wanted to share with you guys. Maybe it's a little inside baseball, but I thought it was definitely worth sharing. So I'm going to do that, and here it is. Here is the article. It's kind of long, but I thought it was worth reading. Dear Hollywood, we don't want to go back to normal. Normal wasn't working. Dear Hollywood, I have something I desperately need to share with you. You might find it surprising coming from a 20-year veteran who owes his livelihood to you, but it needs to be said. I apologize if this upsets you. Actually, sorry, not sorry. Your shows are not worth dying for. This is not the first time I've expressed my frustration with the insane way in which we approach our livelihoods in this industry. The ridiculously long hours, the chronic sleep deprivation, the complete and utter lack of work-life balance, and the families, marriages, and lives that are destroyed or taken away too easily or taken away too early by the perpetual content machine that is or was Hollywood. In fact, I spent the last 6 years screaming from the rooftops into any megaphone I can find that we create entertainment for a living. We're not curing cancer. Sure, we all agree that things could be better in the entertainment industry, and we're all doing our best to make small changes here and there. But up until a few months ago, we were all just too busy to really examine what fundamental changes must be made from the ground up to better protect the livelihood of the craftspeople who sacrifice their health and their personal lives and their sanity, all for the noble pursuit of creating more content. Then COVID-19 came along and changed the game. Since the pandemic began, the entertainment industry worldwide has watched from the sidelines, crippled, lifeless, desperately scrambling to figure out what protocols to put in place so we can go back to work while simultaneously protecting workers from becoming infected. Whether it's the Cinematographers Guild, the Editors Guild, the AMPTP, the AFL-CIO, the DGA, SAG-AFTRA, and IATSE, or OSHA, and if you live here in Canada, there are resources here, and here. Every organization globally is doing its absolute best to figure out what it will take for us to safely resume production as quickly as possible. But in our desperate pursuit to overcome the immense challenge of working amidst a global pandemic so we can get back to normal, we're overlooking the equally important and blatantly obvious issue that has yet to be addressed. Normal wasn't working. The fallacy of building the plane while flying it. For decades, Hollywood has fallen prey to the fallacy of building the plane while flying it, an idiom popularized by Silicon Valley, born from the iterative software development, where you ship your product as early as possible, fix it, ship it again, fix it again, and so on, as opposed to tinkering and fixing for years privately with a controlled team before shipping it to the public. The industry has been aware for decades that the demanding hours and harsh working conditions are less than ideal for everyone involved, all the way up from the PA getting coffee up to the mega directors and Oscar-winning stars, not to mention the boots-on-the-ground craftspeople who spend 16 to 20 hours per day on set, not including their horrendous commutes, or the post-production professionals sleeping in their edit bays to meet insane deadlines and the impossible delivery schedules. But there's just too much to do with too little time to stop the machine and really fix it. While I do believe the industry has made some good faith efforts to implement incremental changes to better protect craftspeople, there has been no transformative change. The argument for this was simple: the show must go on. Guess what? For the first time in cinema history, the show is not going on. The plane is no longer barreling through the air at 575 miles per hour, such that we can't make substantial repairs and upgrades. We can no longer make the excuse that there isn't time or the budget to change the working conditions and demands of our industry, since deadlines and release dates have already been set and must be met. For the first time in cinema history, the plane is stuck in the hangar. For the first time in cinema history, we have the opportunity to build a brand new plane. But in order to fix something, we first have to be willing to recognize what wasn't working. Here's a few tweets, or they're tweets. Scale that doesn't keep up with the cost of living wasn't working, period, end of sentence, full stop. Awful commutes weren't working. Pets with separation anxiety and parents not seeing their kids weren't working. Skirting insane amounts of work onto on-set production assistants until they literally died from sleep deprivation wasn't working. Having to rely on exorbitantly expensive daycares and preschools so you could work the aforementioned 60-plus hours a week definitely isn't working. Normal only was working for the people in charge that made money off other people's hard work. People not putting overtime on their time cards or saying yes to requests that are unrealistic because they don't want to be seen as difficult to work with. The normalization that I can be called multiple times, texted, email, etc. on a weekend, even though I'm not on call, and then get reprimanded for trying to set boundaries. Justification for people just have different ways of communicating when really they're being assholes who demean others around them in order to showcase their power and status in a production. Yeah, it wasn't working for me, so thank you for asking this question. I agree with all the posts here. A big change is needed so everyone can live a more balanced life. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. A standard contract expecting a 60-hour work week before any discussion of overtime was not working. Eating lunches at our desks because it's socially unacceptable to take breaks wasn't working. The cultural pressure to show up to work every single day, even when you were sick and could make others sick, definitely wasn't working. Parents terrified that having kids will make them less desirable as a potential hire because they have outside responsibilities and they aren't able to give everything to the job wasn't working. Missing out on the moments that truly matter, birthdays, anniversaries, dinners with friends, or family time for the sake of one more output wasn't working. Thinking that just one more setup is a good enough excuse to shoot well into the night, forcing crew members to either stay in a hotel between shifts or risk their lives driving home drowsy wasn't working. Being bullied into putting unpaid overtime on your time card because there just isn't a budget wasn't working. Exchanging an on-call workday where you didn't need to come in with a weekend where you are needed without being paid overtime wasn't working. The perpetual lie that working from home was not a secure or sustainable workflow wasn't working. And this goes on. There's a lot of inside baseball stuff that he's talking here. The prevailing belief that you need to pay your dues and work for free in order to break into the industry, thus disqualifying countless candidates who couldn't afford to work for free in order to gain experience and build relationships wasn't working. I've probably missed 150 equally important things that weren't working, and if you scroll to the bottom, I'll show you how to add your most important needs to this list, but hopefully you're starting to get the point. Normal wasn't fucking working. You think it was bad before? Just wait. It's painfully clear that normal wasn't working before the pandemic, but if we start having very difficult conversations about what needs to change in our industry, it's only going to get exponentially worse. In fact, it's already happening. If we don't address the important issues preventing us from living a sustainable life in this industry head on before production starts again, we're going to long for the good old days when production covered our lunches if we begged, bought printer, paper, and toner, provided us editing equipment and furniture, and made sure our offices had lights and air conditioning. Guess who's paying for all those things while you work from home, providing your own editing hardware and software, paying your increased electricity and internet bills, all the while desperately clinging to any paycheck available right now? That's right, you. If we don't begin to set boundaries and have the confidence to respect ourselves, we will cherish the warm and fond memories of having some semblance of a barrier between work life and home life, knowing that if we weren't in the office, we weren't immediately on call 24 hours a day at the beck and call of every random urgent need of directors and producers. You think being stuck at home unemployed is tough now? Wait until you're working from home and getting text messages on a Saturday afternoon for a quick fix. Just because your machine is available and you're probably not going anywhere anyway, right? You thought you were underpaid for your services before? Wait until the job market opens again and we all desperately claw our way to the bottom and devalue our rates, knowing there will be lower budgets and less shows for the foreseeable future, but as long as you're working, right? While the majority of post-production professionals are unemployed right now, wishing they had some form of sustainable income, the minority of those who are still working are getting their asses kicked. 7-day weeks, 16-hour days, no kit rentals to cover the use of their own equipment, no boundary between home and work, all while also trying to homeschool their kids and manage their own sanity during lockdown. As we await production to start again, this is Hollywood's trial period to see what boundaries can be pushed in service of keeping us gainfully employed. How much are we really willing to concede in exchange for what will be smaller paychecks for more work in even less time than before? Listen, we should be lucky to have any work at all right now, right? Sorry, Hollywood, but we're not lucky to be here. You're lucky to have us. If now isn't the time, then when? In March, we didn't know what we were dealing with, but now we do. COVID-19 isn't going away anytime soon. There's never been, by the way, from what I understand, there's never been a vaccine for a coronavirus. Yet. We're playing a long game of chess for at least a year or more, and at some point we have to figure out a way to get back to work safely with minimal exposure to the virus. Lives will absolutely be lost, but this industry was killing us before the pandemic. We're now just more acutely aware of the dangers we face. Thankfully, we have countless organizations and medical professionals compiling hundreds of pages of industry-wide guidelines that I share at the top of this article, which outline in excruciating detail the necessary safety guidelines and protocols that must be put in place in order to protect us all. But while the professionals focus on the safety protocols that will protect us from COVID-19, we as individuals need to focus on the importance of this moment and the stance we must now take to protect ourselves from ourselves. As I argue in excruciating detail in this article, it's so tempting to blame the studio executives and producers for the poor working conditions and the unhealthy lifestyle, but it's not their fault. This is our fault. We've spent decades collectively enabling, accepting, and perpetuating all of the behaviors outlined above, all in fear of losing our jobs. Well, guess what? Practically none of us have jobs right now anyway. And for the first time in cinema history, we have nothing to lose. If there was ever a time to set boundaries and demand change, it's now. The list of requests is overwhelming. I get it. We're not going to change everything overnight or ever, but while we have the window of opportunity, we need to focus on what I believe are the three most vital things we must not back down on when production begins again. 1. Do not sign liability waivers. I can't believe I even have to write this, but there is no more important precedent to set with the industry than our refusal to sign away our lives literally for the privilege of having work. 2, the standard 60-hour work week has got to go, period. Point me to a scientific study that shows more work hours beyond 45 leads to increased productivity and creativity, and I'll send you 100 studies that definitively disprove your theory. More hours does not equal more output, and more importantly, the harder we work, the more compromised our immune systems become, and the more likely we are not only going to contract, but spread COVID-19. And 3, paid kit rentals should be standard for everyone asked to work from home. What he says there, hang on. If you provide equipment that the production or a facility would have provided before, you should be compensated accordingly. This isn't just about your main workstation. This includes your laptop, your phone to manage calls and endless text messages all day long, and also includes stipends to cover faster internet, electricity, printer, toner, etc., etc., etc. I know how badly we want to get back to work, but imagine the possibilities if we all made a collective effort to do this right instead of doing it fast. That's the new version of Hollywood I'm willing to be a part of. The alternative terrifies me. So, and this article was written by, it wasn't on this, but it was written by Zach Arnold. And he calls himself a writer, an educator, a mentor, and a podcaster. He's a film and TV editor. He's a ninja warrior in training and the father of 2 and a Canadian. So I read this. And he's got a lot of really great points. Now, but also there's things that I didn't entirely agree with. And what people don't understand, like I'll talk about when you have a kit. So for instance, if you hire a makeup artist usually comes with their kit. And all movies have makeup artists. And that means the makeup artist has their makeup kit that has everything they need to make up the actors that they're going to work with. Now, when you hire a makeup artist, you also are paying for that person's kit. And it can be expensive. You know, you have some kind of a day rate, you rent it out because they're going out and they're buying all of that makeup. So when you're making a movie, you have to pay for that makeup. They might be buying it. Yes, they might already have it, but they've bought it. They've spent that money to use on your production. So your production has to pay for their makeup. That's just how it works. Now, I have worked in post-production for a long time. Now, in the 90s, for instance, when I was editing a movie, when I got hired to edit a movie, people did not have their own equipment. I eventually had bought my own Avid system, but the equipment people needed, especially non-linear editing systems, they were sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. So most civilians didn't have their own editorial kit. Now, you can't see them, but I've got three screens in front of me, and I use them to edit with. Now, theoretically, everybody these days wants you to have your own equipment. People edit at home. They have their own editorial equipment. That's kind of par for the course. However, you bought that equipment. You have to keep it up. You're paying software licenses. There's certain things I pay every month for. Whether it's Dropbox, whether it's Adobe, Creative Suite, whatever it is, you're paying money. So a production should absolutely, a well-run production would pay your editors for their kit fee or their equipment fee. That should absolutely happen. I completely agree with that. As a producer myself, by the way, this really comes down to, how good of a producer, how good are you as a producer, and how good are you? Like I've said before, and I always get funny looks when I say this to people, but when you are talking about going into production, and I mean shooting a movie, the first thing as a producer, the first thing that I do, the first decision I make. Now, when I say this, it's food. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you've got the best caterer you can get for your crew, and that means the caterer probably has a meat and a fish for lunch, but also has a vegetarian option. You've got to make sure that your crew is well fed. And that also means craft service, or we call them crafty on set. Craft service is different from your caterers. Your caterers provide meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if you're shooting that long. And then craft service, crafty is a craft service table is a table that always has food on it. Usually food that's bad for you, candy, but a lot of great craft service tables, you got to have fruit. You got to have a good selection of snacks that people can munch on, because on a movie set, while there is a lot of waiting around, there's also a lot of movement, and people are constantly, you want fresh coffee. You want to keep people energized. But those are two of the most important things, because why? A crew obviously wants to know that being taken care of. A crew demands that their producers have taken good care of them. And one of the easiest ways to show your crew that you care, that you're looking out for them, is to make sure they get the best food. And and by the way, you have that first day at lunch. The producers and the directors basically have the same amount of time to prove themselves to their crew. The director has until lunch on the first day. And what does that mean? A crew is working for the director. The crew needs to know, where's our next lighting setup going to be? What are we doing? And the only person that can tell them what they're doing is the director. So the important thing that you have to remember if you end up ever directing something is you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared, because you're going to get peppered with thousands of questions a day. And when I say prepared, that means when you walk on set that first day, your first AD, your director of photography is going to say, okay, what are we doing? What are we shooting? Now, you need to know. And not only do you need to know, and you need to know that for the entire day, for the entire shoot. Never ever, if you're directing a film, never ever stop and say, never ever say this. Never say, I don't know. Because you will lose your crew. But if you know what you're doing, if you do what I do, you walk your day. So your director of photography is seeing what you're going to do. Your first AD is going to see what you're going to do. The director of photography communicates to his whole crew, the whole grip and electric and camera crew, what's going on. Because people have to move all that equipment around. So you have to know. But back to this article, the problem with the length of days that you're shooting, if you are going to shorten those days, like let's say you shoot 10-hour days, which is, it's manageable. So you're basically, it's still going to be a 12-hour day, but you're only shooting for 10. So the other 2 hours are for people commute times or pack up times or whatever. The problem is, you shoot for 12 hours and there's a lot of departments on a set that have to stay there longer. I do not disagree with the idea that I think work days should be 10 hours long. The problem with that is it would extend your shoot time, which means it's more expensive. And I mean, I agree. I think with this article, we have to take care of our crew. But you also have to be able to get what you need to get. So it's tough. It's a hard thing. As a producer myself, I would like to see days brought down to 10 hours. But that's really hard. I mean, the industry is shot standard industry time, especially on union sets. You're looking at 12 hours. I agree with everything he said there. But what I don't necessarily agree with is production's production. Making movies is rough. People are paid well, especially on studio and TV projects, streaming projects. And that's kind of, it's a sacrifice. I mean, I understand it's very difficult to have a personal life when you are making films. There's something that I'll tell you this story. It happened a long time ago, so I can tell it to you. So when I was working on the first movie that I was editing, Arcade with Peter Billingsley, I was dating this girl. She was delightful, but once we started on the movie, I hardly ever saw her. And not only did I hardly ever see her, I just wanted to be editing the movie. I was completely obsessed with this film. Every aspect of it. I'd never cut a movie before, and there was very little room for, very little room to do anything else. And for me, I loved it. I mean, I'm like, oh my God, I get to edit this movie, and we were in charge of everything. And this girl at one point, actually, we broke up. She said to me, we got in this huge fight, and she said, "You can't even come over here and fuck me anymore because you're thinking about that goddamn movie." She said, "I can see it in your eyes. You're never thinking about me. You're only ever thinking about the movie." And I was like, huh. She was absolutely right. Like I was consumed. I was literally, and you get that way. You get that way. So it's hard when you're a creative person and editorial, and you're thinking about it. Oh, we can cut it this way. We can cut it that way. It never goes away. You're constantly thinking about what you're doing, and you want to get back there. So it is very difficult. It takes a certain level. You have to be very mentally disciplined. Even when you're like in post, I would sleep in my edit bay. When I was working on Paradox, we had very little time to do it, and it was tough. So I slept in the edit bay, as much as you could get away with it before you had to go home and change your clothes. And you want to change your clothes because when you're sitting in an edit bay, you're in close quarters for a long period of time. But I think that like everything else, there is working in the low budget arena, unfortunately, all of post-production has been completely devalued by the fact that everybody's got their own equipment and people think they can get a lot more out of you, which is true. And, if you want to work on a movie, then it's a trade-off. It's a hard thing. And at the independent level, there's just not enough money to do. I mean, it's really hard. It's a really hard balance, but I do think it's something that we need to address along with everything else. So I agree with this article up to a point. I think that we should have we should have shorter work days. People should work more efficiently, but movie making, there's certain things that it just takes a while. It's not like you can speed up everybody else. You can speed up your job, I suppose, but it's tough. It's really hard. But these are questions we need to be asking, because one of the things that I think overall that our whole culture needs is that people themselves need to be valued more. Paying people less and giving people less is the first thing that goes out the window. We value our employees less and less and less because giving them more money is taking away profit. And, I believe that the better off that your crew is as a producer on a movie, the better you treat your crew, the better they will work for you. And a lot of the time on movie sets, there's nothing you can do. You have setups. There's a methodology to it that hasn't changed in 100 years. So what is it that you do? Well, it's a tough call. But I did like this article because I think it addresses questions that need to be asked that, they never do get addressed. But because, as he said, the airplane is still in the hangar, we're not going anywhere. So, yeah, why not? We should be able to work a little bit shorter days, work more efficiently, and people need to be valued more. The problem is, the flip side to that is, as an indie producer myself, there's only a certain amount of money. And you need to get a certain amount of stuff done in a certain amount of time, and you only have this much money, while taking care of people is great. And I would like to see that done. How do you get the movie that you want made with the money that you have and the time you have? It's tough. It's hard, man. And I don't have all the answers. I just thought it was an interesting article to read. And I wonder what you guys think. Anyway, got a few letters here. Would you believe that Ian Samuels wrote me a letter? He wrote me multiple letters, as a matter of fact. But here's a letter from Ian to kick us off. Rob and fellow Robservationists, 2 of what have become classics of modern comedy series have been withdrawn from all streaming services. I would like to take this time to discuss why the streaming services have been bullied into this action, and also the hypocrisy of this action. The darkly comic League of Gentlemen has many characters and situations that the viewer is supposed to feel uncomfortable about. The taxi driver Barbara, who is a transsexual waiting for the final operation, the final chop. We never see her face here. We only hear her gruff voice. But the character that has led to its withdrawal is Papa Lazarou, a character with a blackface paint, white around the eyes and mouth, much like the old racially insensitive Gollywog character. Then we have the strange comedy world of the Mighty Boosh, which in a number of episodes have used something similar to blackface, in particular in the Series 1 episode Electro, and the character of the Spirit of Jazz. The Spirit of Jazz is played by Noel Fielding, once again with black face paint, but the white pattern is very similar to sugar skulls used in the Mexican Day of the Dead festival. He's wearing a white suit with a white tall hat, which is on fire. His voice for the character is a gruff version of a West Indian accent. So these are the reasons why these series have been withdrawn from the streaming services. So what are the hypocrisy? Well, it has been decided that any use of what is referred to as blackface is no longer acceptable in any sense. At the same time, the Wayans Brothers in White Chicks, in essence doing whiteface, is considered as acceptable and even humorous. So what I say is that whoever is making these broad sweeping decisions are blinkered to their view of racism. Racism is not simply white actors playing a character of color by using makeup. Racism is hatred. When blackface is used in a negative way or in any way that could be construed as offensive, then I agree it is racist. But I find White Chicks offensive, not just for being a bloody awful film, but the fact that the Wayans' use of what I'm going to call whiteface is equally as racist and offensive. Find me people of color that are offended by the Mighty Boosh and the League of Gentlemen, and I will accept the decision. But at the same time, the Wayans should also be punished for their distasteful actions. In the UK, many councils have for years chosen not to put up a Christmas tree or decorations. In any case, they offend Muslims. I have known a number of Muslims, and none of them were ever offended by others celebrating Christmas. Some of them, for the sake of their children, in fact, choose to celebrate it themselves. The decision to withdraw the Mighty Boosh and League of Gentlemen feels like such a reactive action, which has little sense behind it. Ian. Well, Ian, I think, look, here's my thoughts when it comes to something like the Wayans Brothers. Blackface has been used for centuries in order to ridicule and make fun of. And while, yes, I don't think dressing up as a character from the Mexican Day of the Dead is necessarily similar. I think the Wayans Brothers dressing up as white chicks, I don't see that as being, they're not offending the white race. It's different. It's different because, they're not just putting on face paint. They're like literally dressing up as white chicks. And it's kind of funny that they did that. It's not like black Americans or blacks around the world have a long history of doing whiteface to make fun of their white slave masters. It's not something, it's different. And that's why, when people say, well, all lives matter, instead of saying Black Lives Matter, well, of course, that's sort of implicit in being alive on this planet. But when you're saying Black Lives Matter, you're talking about being allies to people that have been very specifically oppressed for hundreds of years, especially here in the United States. So it's, of course, all lives matter. But in the particular idea that Black Lives Matter, it doesn't matter about other people's lives. We all know that everyone's lives matter. The problem is Black lives in particular have been dealt a raw deal for 400 years in this country. There's never been true equality, and the fight for equality. I actually think, even as I lived through the riots, I think there's actually, after what's been happening over the last couple months, I think we might see some real meaningful change. Now, is it going to overcompensate in certain ways? Sure. I think one day that Golden Girls episode where they're wearing the mud masks I talked about yesterday, I'm sure that will come back when people realize that, it's important to recognize real racism where it is. And I think it's okay that we're where we are now. We needed this to happen, and I think we might see some real lasting change, and I think that's good. But yes, I think people are going to overcompensate for a while. Cooler heads, I think, will eventually prevail. But for the time being, hey, if nothing else, it puts the discussion right where it should be. And there's going to be some hard talks that people are going to have with each other. But hey, the time is now. So, but a good letter. Thank you for writing it. So, let's see what else I have here. This one comes from Donnie Pearson. Hey, Donnie. Hello, Rob. Well, this Tuesday, the day before Canada Day number 153, marks a quarter century since the debut of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, co-produced and distributed by what was then 20th Century Fox, now the Disney-owned 20th Century Studios. Disney used to own the Power Rangers between 2001 and 2010, but does own rights for 2 Power Rangers movies, with home media distribution rights being held by Shout Factory. I've been a Power Rangers fan since the Mighty Morphin series debuted on the Fox network, 20th Century's corporate sibling at the time, as part of its Fox Kids block. Gee, I miss Fox Kids. I love all the action and visual effects and the morphominial score by Graham Revell, pronounced Graham Revell. Okay, it's Graham Revell. Graham Revell. All the production on that movie, set in a universe different than the TV universe, is an example of business before friendship. Yes, I heard those 3 words in an episode of Wizards of Waverly Place, and have thought that 3-word phrase was a version of the Jerry Maguire catchphrase that goes, "It's not show friends, it's show business." I have first seen that at a cinema in Fort Worth in 1995 on a day either before Canada Day or between Canada Day and the Independence Day. Paul Freeman, who played Dr. Henry Indiana Jones Jr.'s rival, Dr. Renee Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark, did a great job playing the villainous Ivan Ooze. Likewise, the cast for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers TV series, Amy Jo Johnson as the Pink Ranger, Kimberly Hart, David Yost as Blue Ranger, Billy Cranston, Johnny Young Bosch as Black Ranger, Adam Park, Karen Ashley as Yellow Ranger, Aisha Campbell, Steve Cardenas as Red Ranger, Rocky DeSantos, Jason David Frank as White Ranger, Tommy Oliver, and Paul Schreier as Farkas Bulkmeyer. Jason Nervy as Eugene Skullovich, etc. They did great as well. Personally, I say the score rules more than the rest of the movie. One of its cues, where the Power Rangers summon their new Ninja Zords, was inspired by the late Jerry Goldsmith's score to the 1984 movie Supergirl, which itself was heard in a behind-the-scenes featurette. Whatever the heck that is. Laugh out loud. I give Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie 4 out of 5 lightning bolts. The lightning bolt is the Power Rangers logo. Hopefully, the upcoming Paramount Picture reboot of the Power Rangers would rule more than its 3 predecessors, including the 2017 Lionsgate movie reboot. Here's to a quarter century of more phenomenal action on the big screen and a quarter century more. Thank you for reading my letter, and may the power protect you. Regards, Donnie P. Well, Donnie Pearson, I want to thank you. I got to say, now I like my Japanese science fiction. And what is it, Super Sentai? I never really got into Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I like watching the Japanese versions, but I didn't. I was a little too old when they debuted. I mean, I watched it at first. I thought it was mildly amusing, but you had to be a certain age, I think, and I was a little too old. But I liked that 2017 Power Rangers movie. I thought it was pretty good, and I like the toys, And now they're making Soul of Chogokin toys from Power Rangers, which is even cooler. Dean Mikatich is here. Dean says, "Hi, Rob, and the Post-Geek Singularity. For Father's Day, my kids got me the Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry collection and the Sylvester Stallone collection. You have good kids, which includes Cobra, Tango and Cash, Demolition Man, The Specialist, and Assassins. These are all films I've seen except for the Clint Eastwood The Deadpool. I do not even know how I've not seen this film, as I love the Dirty Harry film, so that will be rectified. However, this is not the film I put on first. I wanted to work my way through the Sly collection before moving on, so I went in with Cobra. I've only seen this film twice before in the late 80s, so it's been 30 plus years since I last saw it. I thoroughly enjoyed the film, but also found it to be a bit on the weird side. The first half of the film is a very dark, gritty, and violent film, while the second half of the film does a 180 and becomes your typical action film of the 80s, and everything has been toned down. You can even see the moment that the film also loses that grittiness as the main characters leave LA behind to head to a safe house outside the city. It seems like 2 different scripts have been slapped together. They probably were. Though looking into the making of the film, it does not appear to have been a troubled production. The only issue came with the editing. The first cut of the film ran just over 2 hours long, and the studio wanted it cut down. The final cut of the movie has a runtime of 88 minutes, something I'll come back to. Because of this, a lot of the violence has been cut, and this included the death of a photographer and most of the murder in the underpass. We also lose out finding who the murderer cult is, and just leaves an extremely basic story. Cobra is a very frustrating movie for me too. Stallone gives a good performance, but it's Brian Thompson as the night slasher that really shines in this film. How has he never been given a leading role? We actually got to go interview him at his house for the Star Trek The Next Generation Blu-rays. He's such a nice guy. I also love the hostage situation in the supermarket at the start of the film that sets up the Stallone character. All in all, Cobra is your typical 80s action cop movie, which is very underrated as no one seems to talk about it. So if any members of the Post-Geek Singularity have not seen it, check it out. Rob, I have 2 questions for you. I was watching the documentary on the Next Generation Season 2 disc. Here you have Brian Thompson talking about his role, Second Officer Clag, in the episode A Matter of Honor. He mentions that he almost lost out on the role as he was meant to wear Christopher Lloyd's costume for Star Trek III The Search for Spock, but it was too small due to Brian's height. When he found out the reason, he called up the production office and said, "Send the costume over so he can sew." We do not get to hear the end of the story. Did the costume department send over the costume so Brian could alter it to fit him? Or were they so impressed with his passion to play the character they forked out to make a new costume? He didn't have to sew it. He didn't have to. My final question is, how long does a film have to be considered feature length, and what is the difference between a feature and feature length? Personal anything with a runtime of less than 90 minutes of storytelling, i.e. not including the end credits, is not feature length. Oh, peace and long life. From what I understand, I always thought it was like 72 minutes. That anything over actually, let's see. To be. How long is a feature film? Wow. I am wrong. Hang on a second. According to Wikipedia, a feature film or feature-length film is a film, also called a motion picture or movie, with a running time long enough to be considered the principal or sole film to fill a program. The term feature film originally referred to the main full-length film in a cinema program that also included a short film and often a newsreel. The notion of how long a feature film should be has varied according to time and place. According to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the American Film Institute, and the British Film Institute, a feature film runs for more than 40 minutes, while the Screen Actors Guild asserts that a feature's running time is 75 minutes or longer. Most feature films are between 75 and 210 minutes long. I would say I thought it was 72 minutes, but 75 minutes or longer seems to be pretty good to me. That's basically what I understood. Now, Dean, I would say that definitely the credits are part of that running time. You know, as much as when you're editing, you're always like, well, how long are the credits going to be? Tango Shalom, for instance, a lot of people ask us that they hear the running time. They're like, well, can't you cut another 5 minutes out of it? And we're like, yeah, the credits are like 8 minutes because so many people participated, and you've got to make sure that they're all in there. So, but yeah, so it's 75 minutes, and it does include, in fact, all of the credits. That's all part of the running time. Omar94 is here. Omar94. Rob, in a previous letter I wrote 1 or 2 weeks ago, was me giving everyone's recommendations for screenplays to read. I wanted to continue that, so here goes. My first recommendation is the original Batman Returns script, one of my favorite scripts I ever read, by the way, by Sam Hamm, simply called Batman 2. This script, I think, would have a lot of problems with it, particularly its story, since I don't entirely know what that movie is about. That said, though, I think Hamm's first draft of the 1989 Batman movie was better, but this one was still good. This script has a completely different story involving Penguin and Catwoman looking for a hidden treasure using Raven statuettes. Oh, I didn't read this one. The major difference from the final film are Penguin not being deformed and called Mr. Boniface, and Catwoman being a museum curator. Robin and Vicky Vale return. Commissioner Gordon has a larger role. Harvey Bullock appears, but is called Eddie Bullock. Joker was hired by an organization called the Raven Society to kill Bruce Wayne's parents. The final battle takes place at Wayne Manor and in the Batcave, and Bruce Wayne proposes to Vicky Vale at the end. While I liked it, it's not perfect, as I felt it drags a little at the beginning, and I don't think the Penguin and Catwoman were very well developed. Hamm wrote 2 drafts, and the one I read was his first, since his second one is unavailable. I'm not sure which one you read, Rob. Maybe it was the second draft that had improvements, since you called it one of the best fantasy scripts and said it would cost $200 million to make. That is true. My second recommendation, and the only reason I read it was because I'd recently left my job in feature production at Warner Brothers, but I could still go in there and get whatever I wanted. My second recommendation, and that's how I got the script, because I was interested in how they were going to do it. My second recommendation is the original Last Action Hero script by Zach Penn and Adam Leff. Having read this script, I like it much more than the final film, which I think is just okay. The major differences from the final film are the story being set almost entirely in the movie world. There's no magic movie tickets, as there's no explanation for how Danny enters the movie world. Danny is 15 instead of 9. Jack Slater is called Arno Slater. All the settings in the movie world are completely different. Slater has no children, so his wife appears rather than his daughter, and the whole thing with his son is absent. There's no animated cat. Lieutenant Decker would have been betrayed Slater and helped the bad guys instead of Slater's friend John Practice, who's absent in this script. The final battle takes place in the movie world instead of the real world. The bad guy was the projectionist who doesn't have a name, and the script ends with Slater leaving the movie world to start a fresh new life in the real world. The script is not perfect, as it would need maybe 1 or 2 more drafts to get it perfect. There was some confusing parts, like this one scene near the end after Danny leaves the movie world and immediately visits his father's grave afterwards. His mother somehow shows up out of nowhere to comfort him. That said, though, I like this script a lot, and I think it would have made a better film than what we got. It also has this really interesting idea about the cycle of violence displayed by Slater and how that affects him and the others around him. These are my 2 screenplay recommendations, Sam Hamm's Batman 2 and Zach Penn and Adam Leff's The Last Action Hero. They are available on Google to read. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Yeah, Omar, I'm always surprised. It's funny, both Passengers and Arrival were 2 films I was really looking forward to, and they are movies, like, I think Arrival is really, really good, but I liked the ending of the original script better, and that's also true of Passengers. I thought the original Passenger script was better. And also, you know what script I really liked far more than the finished film? Jonathan Nolan's first draft of Interstellar, where the Chinese are a big part of it. And it's I like that draft a lot more. The whole existential ending or whatever that Nolan gave the film is totally different from what was made. Well, ladies and gentlemen, guess it's time. It's time for the big giveaway. It's time for Willow Yang, ladies and gentlemen. Willow Talk. Willow Yang is here, and she wrote a letter that is hilarious, but I'll let you be the judges of that. Greetings, Rob. Being stuck at home with the ongoing lockdown, I've had the opportunity to watch a number of movies with my mom. Recently, we had a short Steven Spielberg marathon. We first started with Schindler's List because it was on Netflix, and my mom was interested in the movie after seeing it on a top greatest films list. After that, wanting something that's less stressful, I showed her Raiders of the Lost Ark, since it was also on Netflix, and I haven't watched the movie in a number of years. We get to the part where Indiana turns for the first time to reveal his face. Mom, who's that? Me. That's Harrison Ford. But he's handsome. I thought that Harrison Ford's old. The movie was made 30 or 40 years ago. Harrison Ford wasn't always old. Robert Redford's old now, but he wasn't old and out of Africa. Then we get to the scene where Indiana meets with Marion in Nepal. Is she the female lead? Me. Yes. She's not pretty enough. The male lead's more beautiful than the female lead. Me. I don't really care much about what the actors look like. I care more about the story and the action. Mom. I care. I like seeing beautiful people on the screen. It's enjoyable to look at beautiful people. I know. You've said that before. And who's this Indiana Jones she keeps on referring to? That's the main character's name. They've already said that in the movie a bunch of times. Well, why is he called Indiana Jones? That's a stupid name. How can you not know that that's his name? The title of the movie is called Indiana Jones. Come on, Willow. The title of the movie is Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mom, you can't put a name like Indiana on a resume. Nobody's going to hire you. Why would you give yourself such a stupid name like that? It's the name of a movie character, but they do reveal how he got his name in the third movie. What third movie? The third movie in the series. There are more movies? They made prequels and sequels to the movie. It's like The Godfather. Then we get to the part where Indiana, while pursuing the Nazis that had the Ark of the Covenant, takes out most of them and then gets dragged by one of the trucks. Mom, wouldn't he die getting dragged like that? It's a movie. How did he take out that many people by himself? He's like Superman. It's a movie. This movie feels too much like fantasy. At least Schindler's List feels real. Of course Schindler's List is more real. It's about a real event with real people. This is supposed to be more of a fun adventure. He's Superman. For the rest of the film, my mom referred to Indiana as Superman, but at least she thinks young Harrison Ford is handsome. We then watched Jurassic Park, which was also on Netflix. The little dinosaur is so evil. Which one? The raptors? The one that killed the fat man. Oh, that one. Well, what about the T-Rex? Which one is the T-Rex again? The one you keep on calling Guai Wu, means monster in Chinese. You can immediately tell that Guai Wu is evil just from looking at it. The little dinosaur looks so cute and innocent. It's got that colorful fan. Who would have thought that something so cute would kill someone? Following Jurassic Park, we watched Dava Sha, the Chinese translation for Jaws, which literally means great white shark. My mom nearly jumped out of her chair when Bruce reared its head during their "we're gonna need a bigger boat" scene. Side note, I think that Bruce is female, since female great whites are larger than males and have been known to exceed 20 feet. She also watched Quint's death scene through her fingers, and I had to tell her when it was over. Afterwards, she asked if Saving Private Ryan was any good, since it was also on the top of the list. But given her reaction to Jaws, I decided not to have her watch the movie, thus ending our Spielberg marathon for now. Best regards, Willow. What I would give to have you and your mom on a Zoom call, Willow. By the way, I'm going to do another Zoom call this weekend. Another, not call, but another little Zoom party thing. So if anyone's interested, well, we'll do it. This next letter comes another letter from Dean Mikitich. Dean says, "Hi, Rob, in the Post-Geek Singularity. With all these different movies and TV shows being removed due to blackface, does this mean our beloved Star Trek show could be next? The Klingons in the original series were all played by white actors, yet they were all given a brown, golden skin tone to make them look different, as prosthetics in the 60s were not up to what we have now. Even actors from the next generation onwards were given darker skin tones if they were not black when playing a Klingon, as it had been established by TOS that Klingons have a darker skin tone. Where do you draw the line? I saw a video by the YouTube couple Clownfish TV. They were talking about how the Japanese entertainment industry is now worried and are not going to be able to export their entertainment to the U.S. because of censorship that is currently going on in America and the U.K. Japanese entertainment is already being censored due to the depiction of scantily clad and over-sexualized girls. This is all part of their culture, but they're worried that if they want to export their entertainment to the West, they will have to change their culture to suit Western culture even more. Is this acceptable? No, we cannot force our culture onto someone else. How can you say you want diversity yet demand changes to someone else's culture so it fits your beliefs? You cannot, and you are no longer being diverse. I think AZ from Heel vs. Babyface said it best on Friday Night Tights. We can talk about the issues, but when it gets to the point where we're seeing an episode of Golden Girls being pulled because the characters are wearing a mud mask, you have to stop bending the knee and take power back by saying no. Rob, I'm all for sitting down and talking about the issues, but when they start to demand anything that they see as being offensive pulled, you must draw the line. If we carry on with the way things are going and letting them get away with it, when will the libraries and bookshops start getting raided so what they see as offensive can be burnt in the street? What happens after that? Someone has to have a different opinion to the majority. Do they get pulled out in the street and beaten or even killed? As Picard said in First Contact, we've made too many compromises already, too many retreats. They invade our space and we fall back. They assimilate entire worlds and we fall back. Not again. The line must be drawn here, this far, and no further. Peace and long life, Dean Mikitich. Well, Dean, listen, I don't think it's going to get that bad. I worry that it's going to go down that road, though. I worry because, the helicopter parented every kid gets a trophy generation is not used to the indifference of the universe in the real world. And, we see all that. If something makes somebody feel uncomfortable, they want to get rid of it. And I think that there's going to have to be, right now in academia, we see that if it's amazing, professors have lost their jobs when students are made to feel uncomfortable. And that hopefully will come back around and cooler heads will prevail. But, who knows? I do think, though, that everybody's being overly cautious now, but when it'll die down, and we really have to concentrate on what's really offensive. When you're pulling Golden Girls episodes, or you're going after episodes of South Park, which is inherently meant to offend, it's part of the show's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you think about what you believe and why you believe it. And, that's how a lot of great humor works. I would hope that, Dr. Strangelove, at the end of Dr. Strangelove, it makes fun of humanity because the nuclear holocaust happens and everyone dies. We can't have that, can we? You can't have Lolita because James Mason's all, goo-goo-eyed over Sue Lyons, and, they imply that they have a sexual relationship. Yes, they do. That's part of the story. I hope cooler heads will prevail. Because at the end of the day, humanity, it's so funny to me because all of these stories and all of the offensive things that people come up with is all shit that people have done. Mankind made all this stuff. Humankind made all this stuff. So it's like every time you try and pretend, you can't pretend away ultimately human nature and how we have been the way we are for the last for thousands and thousands of years. What we really need to be doing is not pulling TV shows. What we need to do is come to grips with who we really are. We need to be honest about ourselves. We need to flat out be able to say and go, yeah, you know what? I've said a bunch of racist shit in my life, and I didn't necessarily believe it, but I did it. And I don't feel good about it, but it's like I've met people in the military. They make a lot of tasteless jokes, and you're not going to go tell somebody who's fighting for their very lives and our freedom when they're in the middle of harm's way that they can't make really dark, offensive jokes to get them through the horror, the fear, and whatever. I mean, we have to start dealing with who we are as people. We have to be honest about ourselves. I feel like right now the real honesty is required, not just this superficial knee-jerk, let's make ourselves feel better by doing this right away. When what we really need to do is have a long-term dialogue. We need to start sitting down and being really honest with ourselves. Really honest. Because until we really do that, we really start getting to the roots of these problems. We're never going to solve them. So, David F. is here. David F. Sends in a letter. Hi, Rob. Neo said it best. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. It begins with a struggle to fix a system that has been broken since the beginning. It begins with a demand for fairness at the expense of fairness. New community standards are emerging through the struggle for racial progress in the creative space, growing out of a demand for fairness. Unfortunately, these new rules have been coming into direct conflict with other deep-seated notions of fairness, triggering backlash, rejection, tribalism, and stifling any real progress. I'm a public interest lawyer who has spent years studying the history of law. By law, I mean the rules that actually govern our lives, not the written laws of the government. Those laws usually lag behind rules society actually lives by. By the time a law hits the books, society at large has usually been living by that rule for years, and it will stay on the books long after we've collectively moved on from it. The rules we live by emerge from our customary and cultural expectations of fairness. We choose to write down some of these rules in constitutions, statutes, and ordinances. Those expectations change over time. When there's too much difference between the current conventional wisdom and the people and the rules on the books, the rules will change or lose all effect by just ignoring the old rules, like marijuana and sodomy laws, changing the rules through the legislative process, or by the courts, or just creatively bypassing them. Remember civil unions? Emerging rules and new community standards are enforced today the same way as they have been since the Stone Age. Social ostracization, shame, banishment, and in extreme cases, e.g. conducting business on continental grounds, permanent excommunication. This is what cancel culture is really about, enforcing new community standards. Unfortunately, community rules are enforced without the benefit of constitutional protections, like due process, standards of evidence, or arbitrary and capricious actions. One piece of evidence taken out of context can trigger immediate judgment and sentencing, though you can try bringing an appeal to the masses. The courts have long recognized one of the biggest inherent evils of discriminatory laws was the use of arbitrary and immutable characteristics of the individual, like race or national origin, to officially distinguish between classes of people and treat them differently under the law. There is an inherent unfairness in applying special rules to characteristics that a person cannot change, and any such rule is immediately constitutionally suspect. Merely using it as criteria, even if well-intentioned, sends the official message: you are different. As such, the courts require any government use of race-conscious policies to be strictly limited and go no further than necessary to further a compelling government interest, like facilitating integration through housing programs. The community at large is not bound by these restrictions and can enforce race-based rules on a whim, such as the rule that white people should not write white minority cultures. There is a legitimate basis for that rule, born out of fairness. It is essentially cultural copyright and asks, should a person not of a culture be able to commercialize cultural traits that they did not earn? Shouldn't the right to capitalize on cultural distinctiveness belong to members of that culture, like a trademark? Similarly, there is a concern that a writer will not be able to capture the nuance of the minority experience, leading to harmful misrepresentations, as history has shown us time and time again. However, a rule like white people shouldn't write minorities conflicts with the equally strong value to not impede or restrict artistic expression. Artistic expression is all about communicating one's emotions and perceptions, and any limit on that, or the millions of ways people can be artistically inspired by other people, is dangerous. Ideas have diffused between cultures for all of human history, and usually brings people closer together with greater empathy by allowing people to walk in another's shoes. Another issue of fairness arises when the white people shouldn't write minorities rule is combined with explicit requirements for the inclusion of rich minority representation to qualify for, say, the Oscars. If white people can't write minorities, but the Oscars start requiring rich and non-trivial representation, then one can only conclude that white people can no longer write qualifying scripts for the Oscars. Well, that doesn't seem fair either. Somehow, I don't think the world would have been better if Quentin Tarantino had been unable to write Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Django, or Hateful Eight because he's white. I guess he could have pulled a James Cameron and made his minority characters 10 foot tall and blue and set on the world of Pandora. It would probably be far more productive to find common ground on issues that don't bring basic notions of fairness into direct conflict. This could create a culture of continuous improvements and small victories. Patience, however, has completely run out due to a history of broken promises, token results, and persistent disparities. Like Neo said, I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. What a great letter. What a great letter, David F. Please send in more like this one. I completely agree with everything that you are saying here. And again, it's tough call. It is a tough call, but hopefully we are in a position now where we're making some real progress, some real change will be made, meaningful change that I think will filter down through the culture for a while now. I just hope that there's a lot of people, there's a lot of very talented people that have spent a long time moving their way into the industry. I hope they can continue to create. I really do. It would be a shame if people couldn't. By the way, the article that I read today, I forgot to put it into the live chat, but I will put it into I'll put it in the live chat here, and I will also link to the article in the description. So there it is. Actually, I think I might have put the wrong. I did. I put the wrong. I put the wrong thing in there. That was about Chop, but I apologize for that. I'll put it in the description. Anyway, let's see what you guys are saying. What are you saying? I don't know. So I'm going to go back and see what you are saying here. Willow's here. Willow says, I was watching A Quiet Place with my mom, and she asked why they didn't live by the waterfall. I said it'd be too hard to build a new house. She said they can just set up a tent. It's still better than being silent all the time. What do you think? Sometimes our mothers come up with, I love the fact that one of the great things about moms, I always say that women are more pragmatic than men, but no one is more pragmatic than a woman that's a mother. Mothers are probably the most pragmatic people of all. And I think your mom, score one for mom over there, because there's absolutely a great idea. Live by a waterfall, or move to the ocean, move to the beach, where there's constantly sound. That's a really great idea. I love your mom. We gotta have your mom come on the show at one point. Koba, our favorite Simeon, sends in a tip and says today would have been Ray Harryhausen's 100th birthday. Wow, is that true? Ray Harryhausen, 100 years old today. Some of my favorite Ray Harryhausen movies. I love his Sinbad movies, but Jason and the Argonauts, that was the movie that made me fall in love with him. Producer Gerald sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. I was thinking for your 500th episode, how about if you make a pitch video for your next movie? What genre would it be? Your budget? Original adapted screenplay? Which actors are you thinking of casting? Locations? How and why it will make money? Ooh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea, but I don't know if I want to give that away. I don't know, because I think by doing it on my YouTube show, it would denigrate the whole idea in the eyes of Hollywood. But I could do it for fun. Maybe it wouldn't be something I really want to make, but I could do that anyway. That's not a bad idea at all. I think that's really, really good. Bob Quall is here. Ambassador of the Fantastical. Any movie production workers treated the same in every country? Better, worse? If better, how do they stay visible? Maybe U.S. productions could model new guidelines after successful and more worker-friendly foreign film practices. Well, it is different in other countries. There's like French hours. The French and the Italians work lesser hours, and they also can drink like wine at lunch and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that hopefully it's just, you know, it's a tough call because production is production. I mean, I know it has to change, but the thing is, the way the industry is even set up, it's set up around these 12-hour workdays. That doesn't mean they can't be changed. But again, if you're, here's the thing. Let's say you switch to a 10-hour day, okay? And if you were shooting 5-day weeks and you're shooting a 10-hour day, you would lose a day. You'd lose a whole day, pretty much. So you'd have to make that up, which means your $100,000 a day thing becomes, so if you shot for 5 days, you don't need $500,000 now, you need $600,000. And if you're shooting over, say, 4 months, that's a lot of money. And that becomes problematic. So it all comes down to a money issue, and it's very difficult. I mean, I think this article has a lot of good points to make, but it's tough, man. It is tough. Alexander Wilson says, did that letter try and equate the Wayans whiteface to blackface? That person needs to take a history class, talk to Dr. Cornel West, or go to the African American Museum in D.C. There are a lot of people who really don't know what racism is. Alexander, you're right, and that's why I objected to that. I don't think that the Wayans brothers dressing up as white chicks is at all, you can't even equate it to blackface. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all. I mean, the mechanics of it might be the same, but it certainly doesn't have the same meaning at all. And that's what I said. But everyone wants to equivocate. It's like, well, it's as if they're equal things, and they're not equal things. The mechanism is the same, but the mechanism's the same. You're using the same equipment and all that, but the meaning and the reasons behind it are very, very, very different, and that's a problem. Factual Opinion sends in a tip and says, to me, season 3 of Deep Space Nine isn't as great as TNG's third season. Oh, I totally agree with you there. I think season 3 is a bit hit and miss. I think Deep Space Nine really revs up in season 4, and I've often said that season 6 of Deep Space Nine, I think, is the greatest season of modern Star Trek. Zachary King sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, just curious if you've seen the new Perry Mason show on HBO. It's quite good. I have not yet, but I do want to watch it. It looks great. I love that. Michael Preston sends in a super chat and says, the Obsolete Man Twilight Zone episode, we are headed there. Oh, you are right. What a great episode. Burgess Meredith, one of the few episodes he did. It's who is it? Is it Fritz Weaver? Is it Fritz Weaver and Burgess Meredith? It's what a great episode. It's such a great episode. I love The Obsolete Man. But yeah, we are headed there, Michael. And if you haven't seen The Obsolete Man, check it out. Claudius the Generalizer is here. Hashtag cancel culture. When it comes to representation, exactly who's complaining? How many are complaining? If there's an article, a protester, or a tweet, do they represent a movement? Are we being spun? And if so, by whom? I think that in a way we kind of, it really depends. I mean, like I what's so strange to me is now I see more people of color of all kinds working in the industry than I have ever had. And I always work with very strong female executives from the time I first started out. When on Leatherface, the art director, Rebecca Carriaga, who I work for directly, she was a woman. And then when I went to work at Warner Brothers, half the executive staff there, whether it was Lucy Fitcher or Alan Stewart or Lisa Henson, they were all like senior vice presidents at Warner Brothers, and Penelope Foster. So Yeah, I mean, I think there's more in Hollywood. There's more representation than people might think, but that doesn't mean that we can't do more. Claudius goes on to say, actors, who and how many want to ban actors from acting in roles which are different from their own ethnicity? What's the definition of constituency? There are 36 to 41 million people of African ancestry in this country. How many support these positions? That's a good question. I don't know. I have no idea. But look, I do think that we want to have a more equitable system. But I think that what it really comes down to is, I can only speak about Hollywood. I mean, there's a small percentage of every... Hollywood's such a crazy business. There's such a small percentage of people that get into this business. If you look at it from a national level, there's just not a lot of people there. And then when you have to deal with, if you're talking about the fact that, okay, 13% of America is black, well, of that 13% of our population, how many of those people want to go to Hollywood and make it? And that's true of any group. You know, I mean, we're a small, demented, dedicated bunch, we are. And I think a lot of people, if you make a great movie, like if you go on the film festival circuit and you make a great film, people, at least my experience, people are more interested in the film and the work that you do. And when it comes to the work itself, like if you're a person of color and you make a great movie, if you're going out on the festival circuit, nobody's going to judge you because of the color of your skin. They're going to judge you by your movie. And if your movie is anointed, if it becomes cool on the indie scene and you become an indie darling, that's how you get into the industry. You know, people really, if they think they can make money and exploit your talent, they don't care what color you are. They don't care. They just want you to be good. So then they'll be like, oh, let me sign you here. Let go make this movie for me. I mean, Hollywood, there's so few people that are truly talented that the ones that are talented, whatever color they are, they rise to the top and they will be equally exploited. So, but it's rough, man. It's a tough business. Tough business. Ray sends in a super chat. Rob, have you watched Dark Season 3? I have not. I think you mentioned it before you watch it. I can't remember. I have not watched it. I know it just dropped, didn't it? I don't know if it dropped here. I know somebody said it dropped in England. I guess that would mean it dropped here. I think. I don't know. Newt says, Robert, did you know that Casey doesn't have bad dreams because she's just a piece of plastic? Yes, Newt told me that. Yes, you did. Alexander Wilson says, is the Quinn Snyder interview going to happen? The NBA season is about to start up, which I'm actually excited for. I hope that Kawhi and the Clippers win the title so that they shove it in the face of the Lakers. How did the Lakers receive PPP money? I don't know. Didn't they give it back? They gave it back, didn't they? I'm working on that interview. We'll see if I can get it. It'll be for the 500 show, but he's a busy man. So I just need 2 hours of his time or an hour of his time. We'll see. But I need those questions too. I don't know what to ask him. But when I set it up, I'll come back to you and ask him or get those questions for you. Ray sends in a super chat and says, I wanted to say I find it crazy how well Dark managed to balance so many characters. Yeah, I mean, it's a good show, man. It is a good show. I can't wait to watch the third season. Regis K sends in a tip and says, last time Willow asked for an animated movie with great acting for her mother. May I suggest The Illusionist by Sylvain Chomet? I have not seen The Illusionist. I know the movie, but I have not seen it. That's a good idea, though. I guess Willow's mom would dig that. I always feel like if we were going to tell Willow's mom to watch something, we have to. It better be damn good. Like it has to be the best of the best. Otherwise, we'd be letting her down. Let's see. I believe I have another letter here. Another letter from, yes, Ian Samuels. Rob and fellow Robservationists. 2 of what have become classics of modern... Oh, wait. I already read that one. You have another one. There's another one he sent me. And here it is. I didn't mean to read that one. Rob and fellow Robservationists. When I was about 8 or 9, my interest in horror developed into enjoying a series of films. I enjoyed the Friday the 13th series. That was my go-to masked killer. I enjoyed the Nightmare on Elm Street, but it didn't hold my attention past the first. I enjoyed the films in the House series and also the Howling series. Admittedly, the Howling wasn't as good as An American Werewolf in London, and there are some weak films in the series, but I found them entertaining. But that brings me on to a subject brought up in a recent video. There have been many attempts to keep the vampire films and zombie films going, but little attempt to keep the werewolf trope still alive, often being reduced to the adversaries in vampire movie series. So I was thinking about a reboot of The Howling. I know generally reboot, remakes, and reimagining is a horrifying term in horror, with the likes of remakes of Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw, Friday the 13th, the awful American remakes of Japanese and Korean horror films. If we keep too much of the premise, that of a series of rapes and murders where the victims have all been ripped apart, the main character can be a female investigative journalist or a detective looking into the crimes. If done properly and if done well, rather than just a remake of an individual movie, a studio has an opportunity to reboot a series. And this was done previously with ones I mentioned. Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Leatherface, all of which are pretty awful. But if done well, you have a potential new cash cow. I would suggest for effects, get one of the masters, Rick Baker or Tom Savini, or K&B. To pull the crowds, a studio movie should go for big names. Perhaps Jada Pinkett Smith is the journalist or detective. I suppose you could double up and try to get Will Smith to play the werewolf killer, though that's maybe a bad idea. Ian. Yeah, I have to tell you, I love werewolves, and like I said, everybody should read Glenn Duncan's novel, The Last Werewolf, and the other 2 books in the series. And I think Ridley Scott bought that book. Scott Free owns it, or they had it under option. I'd love to make that book. Somebody should make that book. AJDZ sends in a super chat and says, have you seen the rocket jump video about Marcia Lucas creating the race against time in the Battle of Yavin editorially with inserts and ADR? Yeah, I have. It's funny because I watched that and I'm like, well, that's exactly what an editor is supposed to do. They've said that movies are written 3 times. They're written once on the page, they're rewritten when you're shooting them, and the final rewrite comes when you edit the movie. And as an editor myself, I completely buy into that. You discover things in editing that you create moments that weren't there. You create things that, I think in a way you kind of, when you're shooting these things, you have this vague notion of how you're going to do it, but I think having a great editor, and Marcia Lucas was a great editor, she comes in and turns that sequence into something that's terrific. But yeah, I'm one of the people, the school of thought I come from is that the reason George Lucas made these Star Wars special editions and the reason the originals are not available anymore is because the Star Wars special editions have a copyright of 1997. And when George was married to Marcia, the original Star Wars movies, she was there. And those movies, all the proceeds, all of that merchandising, all the money those movies made, she got some of it. But because she owns part of them. But by making the Star Wars special editions copyright 1997, and I recently looked, that's what they're copywritten on Disney Plus. That's why he did the special editions and pulled the other ones out of. He pulled not only that, but he released the original versions on DVD to add insult to injury on one of the re-releases in the aughts. And so that's why the new Star Wars, the reasons why you can't get the original theatrical editions, because he doesn't want anyone else other than himself to own them. At least that's a theory. It's a theory I tend to agree with. Torrin Atkinson is here. Hello, Torrin. Blackface, whiteface, brownface. Folks want definite rules of what's okay and what's not. It's a complicated and imprecise issue that won't be resolved with a list. Keep your ears, mind, and heart open. No, I agree. The real question is intent. What is the intent? First of all, if you're making, I would say that there are probably ways, if you're making some kind of like, I haven't heard anyone pull the C. Thomas Howell movie Soul Man out of circulation, although maybe they will at some point. But that is a movie that has a lot to say about race relations, and I'm sure now people would write it off. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's problematic. I only saw it once when it was originally out, but I mean, I liked it. I understand what they were going for, and I would hope that cooler heads prevail. It's always about intent. I mean, remember, even in our judicial system, if you kill somebody, there's levels of murder. It's either first degree, second degree, third degree manslaughter. I mean, so there should be, I think things have to have nuance, and we have to have an understanding. And, smart people can look at these things and they can make these decisions. It just takes, you have to be, like you said, you have to keep your ears, mind, and heart open to guide you. And I agree. Honest Asian Guy sends in a tip and says, "Hey Rob, I recently rewatched 1981's Dragon Slayer, and to me, the Go Motion dragon still looks amazing." You mean Vermithrax pejorative? I love the dragon in Dragon Slayer. That was back when ILM had come up with their Go Motion, and what they were doing was basically they were able to add motion blur in between frames, so you actually had smooth range of motion, and we saw it in the Tauntaun in Empire Strikes Back, and the walkers too, but we really saw it with the Vermithrax pejorative, the dragon from Dragon Slayer. That movie has not been available in HD, and I think it's on Amazon. It's streaming on Amazon. The transfer is gorgeous. It's gorgeous. I ran across it, and I'm like, oh my God, why can't I get this movie on physical media? And yeah, man, why can't you? I don't know. Mukbang is here. Mukbang says, general support. Sends in a super chat. He says, "You're doing a pretty good job discussing these difficult issues. Keep up the good work." Well, I appreciate that, Mukbang. See, I don't necessarily think they're difficult issues, but they need people that have great understanding. Alexander brought up Cornel West. Like, I love Cornel West, and I love listening to him. I love reading his work, and you need people like him. It's weird. I was talking about somebody, Samuel Delany, who's a science fiction writer. He wrote this book called Dahlgren that blew my mind. When I read Dahlgren, I did not know that Samuel Delany was a black gay man living in New York. I had no idea. And it was just, that book blew my mind. And I had it in paperback. And it was one of those paperbacks that I bought, but I was scared to read because, like, you had to turn the book. Sometimes the text was, and I read this book, and it's really hard to. I think the two science fiction novels that I had the hardest time reading, but I got through them, were Dahlgren and Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle's The Mote in God's Eye. They were tough, man. They were tough to read, but I was thinking to myself when I found out about Samuel Delany's an interesting cat. And I didn't know anything about him when I read the book, and nor when I bought the book would I have cared. But it was just interesting because when I was reading his book, the fact that what his color was, what his preferences are, none of that mattered. It was just this crazy science fiction novel that I was reading, and I would want to find out about the writer later. But great ideas, compelling ideas, can come from everywhere, and I think it's so weird, that. I mean, obviously, I understand our legacy of culture, but man, again, our most valuable resource. This is why I say, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. Every single person on this planet, every one of them, is unique. I mean, okay, don't throw Rob, there are twins, and yes, but okay. But even twins, there's only one. I know there's two twins, but there's only one twin unit. Every single person's unique, and it's like I guess I have a hard time discriminating, figuring out why you would discriminate against people because of. I mean, I understand superficially, but every single person's unique. Every single person has something of value to offer of some kind, and the idea that we would, I just don't understand why you would ever just write somebody off, based on their gender or their color. There's only one of them on the earth. There's only one of them in the entire infinitude of the universe. There's only one of each of us. That means, if you think about it, the most precious resource that we have, the most precious resource, the rarest resource is us. Each one of us. We're priceless. And we're only here for a certain amount of time, which makes us even more priceless. So we have to get over these differences. I would much prefer, let's start embracing everybody, and we can exploit everybody, but in a way to benefit all of us. Let's get us all doing some great things on the same page. Let's motivate people. That's why we got to educate everybody. Everybody's unique. You never know. When people are properly educated, they don't have to worry about healthcare. They don't have to worry about whether they're going to college. You want to have these systems available for all, because who knows what people are going to come up with? Wouldn't you want to live in that world? Every single person you meet. So next time, when somebody wants, I don't understand. I got to tell you, I'll be honest. This is totally, my mother used to yell at salespeople. My mom, I used to hate, one of the reasons I hate clothes shopping. I hate clothes shopping more than anything in the world. I can't deal with it. If I'm going to go buy something, I used to go into Banana Republic and I'd save up. I'd get $500 and I'd go into Banana Republic and just buy everything I needed. I need 10 t-shirts and I'd get, okay, I like these particular t-shirts. I get all the colors, and then I get a few polo shirts on whatever. I'd leave. I couldn't hang with because my mom would yell. She wasn't mean necessarily. She was kind of a Karen. And when I watch these women screaming and yelling at people in stores about not wearing masks, it's like, those people are at work, man. They're there at work. They're serving the public all day long. And when people are yelling, I feel like when you're yelling at somebody in the workplace, to me, it's like fingers on a chalkboard. I can't deal with it. I can't hang with that at all. Because it's like, why are people so, they're just doing their jobs, man. And when you're yelling at them, they have a million things they're trying to deal with. You're dealing with the public. You're trying to make people happy. When someone comes into your store, nobody who works at a store wants their customers to leave unhappy. And watching all these videos of people screaming and yelling for not putting masks on. Put a mask on. When you go into someone's store, no shoes, no shirt, no service. It's simple as that. I don't know what this has to do with people, but basically, just treat each other better. Can't we just do that? Isn't that just a baseline? Anyway, let's see. Claudius says, there's a lot of unnecessary chatter reacting to comments made by a few. Many of these controversial decisions are being made by content owners protecting their brands, or by talent like Alexander Duncan or Mike Henry, not by most minorities. That could be. Again, I think that everybody, you want to try and do the right thing, and everybody's trying to be preemptively help their brands. You're right. But that's why I think that taking off various episodes of shows, what I find so strange to me is okay, you're going to take off episodes of South Park that make fun of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, I understand that, but the reason you're doing that is because people that are upset by that will kill you. That's what's happened. And yet, how many episodes where they're making fun of Jesus is there? Why is one okay? Why is protecting one religion okay and not the other? It's such a weird, it's bizarre to me. There's no rhyme or reason for it. But you're right. Do It for Cash sends in a tip and says, whiteface is not equitable to blackface because whiteface doesn't perpetuate stereotypes that harm the livelihood of white people. It's bang on, sir. Blackface has always been laced with harmful stereotypes besides modern times when it is used as social commentary. I agree with you, and blackface goes back a lot longer than people might think. But you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And that's why I think that's why it's bad. That's why it's bad. Jason Bueno sends in a super chat and says, pre-ordered the child life-size hot toy. Have you seen it? I have seen it. I did not. I did not order. I did order the Mandalorian, the 6-scale Mandalorian that comes with the child. I've got my life-size Yoda that's over there. The child, I don't know. Maybe I have time. Maybe we'll see where it goes. If the child has something profound to say, if he becomes the kind of philosopher that Yoda is, maybe I would do that. But until then, maybe not. But it is pretty cool. Stubble McShave sends in a super chat and says, I've gone through a Clint binge. I'd like to see the good, the bad, and the ugly standoff between the man with no name, William Money, and Harry Callahan. Somebody should do that supercut. Put it on YouTube. I bet you could actually cut that together. Because I think was Dirty Harry shot in widescreen? Because Unforgiven is. I mean, that would be pretty funny. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring an end to this episode of Robservations. I know it's only 90 minutes. People are like, wait, what? I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode 455. Tonight, we are talking on Whining About Movies, War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds, ladies and gentlemen. Directed by Byron Haskin from 1953. It was the first movie it was my first favorite movie. In my entire life, my first favorite movie. So join Elizabeth and I for that tonight. I want to thank everybody for their generous support of this channel. I want to thank everybody for writing letters. I want to thank everybody for participating. And if you want to write a letter or send me a video, I will play it on the show. You can send it to me at the Burnettwork.net website. And I love getting videos from all of you. And remember, the 500th show is coming. So if you want to make crazy videos, whatever, I don't know exactly if I do ever. I mean, like I've only missed like 2 shows in the last 4 months, doing 2 shows in the last 4 months, and if I keep it up, so I have 45 more shows to do. So that would put me smack into the middle of August. So sometime around August 15th. There is going to be the 500th show of Robservations. I have already reached out. I did 5 interviews for the 400th show. I'm going to try and do 10. That might be too ambitious. I've reached out to some people. One person already got back to me. And I'm going to start actually doing those interviews as soon as I can, because it takes a while to edit them and inset them into graphics and things like that. So looking forward to doing that. And that should be fun. But if you want to participate, please do. Send me videos now. I will save them. Or if you want to send me videos now, you can. But then if you want to do a video for the 500 show, you don't have to send it now. I'd probably need it 5 days in advance. So by August 10th. So we'll do that. And I think we're going to do another Zoom party on Saturday. That was something people have asked about. We've done 2 now. I think we're going to do a 3rd one. It was very much a success. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of Robservations 455. Remember, people, hang on. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, and gentle beings and kind creatures from across the 28 known galaxies, I will see you hopefully tonight at 7 o'clock. But until then, have a better day.